Hello, my name is Jessica Aquino. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. My parents are from Puerto Rico. They both came from a different religious background. My dad's mom was a practicing witch. She practiced witchcraft all of her life. My mom was introduced to Santeria, which is similar to witchcraft, but when people talk about Santeria, they involve Jesus in the process. So when I was a kid, I watched my mom practice Santeria. I would see my mom filled with different spirits that were very frightening to me and my siblings. She believed that this was the God that we were supposed to serve, and I remember going with her to a woman's apartment where they would practice this religion, and they would have Jesus on the cross on the table, and they would pray to Jesus and ask him for allowance so that these crazy spirits would speak through them. And I remember thinking as a child, I am so afraid of this God that my mom serves, and I don't want to have anything to do with it. However, as I began to grow older, part of being a practicing santera is that your children must be involved in the practice as well. And I remember my mom telling me, if you don't do these things, the spirits will come and they'll haunt you in the middle of the night, or they'll punish you. And so I would have to put together a shrine of offerings that included Bacardi and cigar smoking and candles and dancing. And I did it because I was afraid, not because I believed that this was a safe God. At the same time, my dad was a heroin addict, and so I grew up in a very dark home. My dad was high most of the time, and when I was a kid, I didn't know the difference between him being sober or high. I had no idea what was going on, but I remember wondering why my dad would spend hours and hours in the bathroom, and me and my sisters would have to go up to the third floor to a stranger's house to use the bathroom. And it was because of the lifestyle that my father was living. I remember one time we were all home, just my mom was cooking and me and my sister were listening to music, and my dad was sleeping, and I heard a knock on the door. And in the midst of the music, that knock seemed to be so loud and so scary to my heart. And I remember my mom walking over and asking who was on the other side of the door, and no one responded, and so she opened the door. And when she opened the door, a whole bunch of men came into the house. They held us at gunpoint. At the time, I was a kid. They held my mom at gunpoint, my sister, myself, and they asked us to be quiet. It seemed like everything was going in slow motion. I watched these men go into the room and tie up my dad, tie up his feet and his hands, and drag him out of the house by his hair. And I remember thinking, what can I do to help my dad? In the midst of who he was someone that I loved very much. And so they dragged him out, and I heard him yelling and screaming because of the pain of them dragging him down cement floors or cement stairs. And so I remember at that time my mom said, you know, we are moving and we cannot continue to live this way. And so we moved. And in any case, my father at some point was arrested, and my mom still practicing Santeria, and us just living a very dark life. And when I was in middle school, I started exploring with drugs and alcohol and cocaine, and hanging out with people much older than me that wanted to help me become an addict. I'm not sure why, but they did, and so at a young age, just like my dad, I began struggling with drugs and alcohol. And at the time, my mom was very, very, very ill. And I remember a neighbor moving next door, a Christian gentleman who would play Christian music very loud. And we became so angry. My sister and I would threaten him every day. We would knock on his door, we would bang on his door, and we would threaten him, and we would tell him, if you come out of your house, we're gonna beat you up. We never bumped into him in the hallway, incidentally. But there was a Christmas, I'll never forget this Christmas. My mom was very ill, and she had been bedridden for a few weeks. And the gentleman actually knocked on my door, and I happened to be the one to answer. And he asked, he said, "Hey, I heard your mom is very sick. Can I come in and pray and worship with her?" And I didn't care. I said, I don't care. You can come in and do whatever you want. And I remember him coming in, and there was a presence that came in with him. And he went into the room and prayed with my mom and worshiped and read her the word, and she thanked him. And he said, "Hey, don't thank me with your words. The way you could thank me is by coming to church when you get better, because you will get better." And that weekend, she got better. She was up and ready to go. And she knocked on his door and she said, I'm ready to go to your church. So she went to the service, and she came back a new woman. She came back, me and my sisters just so happened to be home, and she came into the door, slammed it shut. She was like, "You are not going to believe who I met. You're not going to believe it." And we're like, "Who? Like, who? What's the excitement about?" She said, "Girls, I finally met him. I met Jesus. I finally met him." And she started to tell us that everybody's life was going to change. And of course, I'm making a connection to the Jesus that she was talking about when she was involved in Santeria. So I had no interest. In any case, I did see a glory on my mother's face I had never seen before. In fact, I saw a glory I had never seen before. And she got a large garbage bag, and she started tearing down all of the altars that she spent a lot of money building. Every single one of them, all of the music that had any significance to serving other gods. And I remember her taking the phone off of the wall, and she said, "This is going to be a holy house. So you guys cannot use my phone anymore because you gossip. And I don't want any gossiping in my house." I thought that we were like, oh my gosh, she's losing it. Shortly after that, my oldest daughter spent a lot of time with my mom. My mom had prayer and share group, which is what Christ Tabernacle used to have years ago. It's small groups today, but she had the group coming over to her house, and my daughter was 5 years old, and she was involved in the Bible studying, the praying, the worshiping. And so when I pick up my daughter, I saw the glory of the Lord on her as well. And every night my daughter would invite me into her room, and she would say, "I'm gonna pray for you because Jesus wants to help you." And this little girl at 5 would lay hands on my chest, and she would say, "God, give her a new heart. Change my mom's heart, heal my mom's heart." And then she would put her hand on my head, and she would say, "Heal her mind, change her mind. You're able to save my mom. God, save my mom." And I would turn my face because I felt so convicted, but I wasn't sure that her God was going to answer her prayers. And so shortly after, I want to say about a year after this went on, I mean, my daughter prayed for me all the time. There were times that I wouldn't come home for days, and she would say, Grandma, call mommy, because I want to tell her something. And she would say, Mommy, God loves you, and I do too, and Jesus is going to save you. And again, I would feel like I'm running away from this kind, loving God because I was confused. The gentleman next door continued to minister to me. Everywhere he would see me, he would say, Mama, come here, I want to show you what God's word says about you. And this is on the streets of Brooklyn and Bushwick. I want to show you what Jesus says about you. And I remember one day, I really wanted to know what Jesus says about me. And I listened to what he said, and I went to church. I accepted the Lord in my life, and my journey began there. There was so much conviction that I had because I was a user. And so I ended up going into a program to become clean and free from drug and alcohol abuse. And so when I started looking for a job, I asked God, who's going to hire me? Who's going to hire me? I know nothing. And but by faith, I opened up the newspaper. At the time, it was a newspaper. It wasn't Google. It wasn't internet. And I saw Marriott, and on the bottom of it, it said Spirit to Serve. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'll apply there. I have a spirit to serve. And so the Lord showed me that as I stepped out, he was going to open up doors. So I applied to work at Marriott, and I started at the front desk. And I can say that the favor of the Lord was upon me. The general manager, the resident manager, they just took a liking to me, and I could not understand why, but they did. And I can tell you that my whole career at Marriott, once God opened that door, I never had to apply for a job. I never had to apply for movement, is what I mean. I didn't have to apply for a promotion. It just came. And they began to invest in me, and I did front desk, I did sales, I did events, I did human resources, I did operations. And eventually I moved from working in the corporate setting to following God's call into ministry. I was always a part of Christ Tabernacle Church. That's where I got saved. And there was a time when I was, in my career that the Lord gave me a dream about being a security guard at my church. And I remember seeing a full-blown uniform, and I thought, I don't want to do security. I would never want to do security. But what God was showing me was that he wanted me to be a watchman on the wall, and that I would be a person in the organization that would watch who comes in and who goes out. And so shortly after, I was offered a position at Christ Tabernacle to become the operations director, working under Pastor Durso and Pastor Adam at the time. And I grew from that role to their chief operating officer, and we opened up a second campus together, and God just continued to invest in my life, and my life has never been the same. I have gone through many challenges. I've battled cancer a few times during my season and my walk with God, but I can say that he's never left me. Since the moment I said yes, God opened up doors. He healed me. He restored my mind. He changed me. If you look statistically, if you look at my life, you can actually look at this in Google. If you look at my life, the chances of me being where I am today are slim to none, because I should have been a product of my environment, but God was so gracious that he would come and visit us in the midst of us practicing dark things and involved in all kinds of things that have nothing to do with him. I am now married to an incredible husband who has supported me in every way, who has loved me through just all of the challenges that I've experienced. And I have 5 children. I have a grandchild, and I am living such an amazing life because of God stepping in and saying no more to what we were experiencing. That pretty much sums up my story. We were born into all kinds of crazy idols and practices, and God saw us, and He saw us kicking about in our blood, and He said, live. And that's my story.